They always told me I was too sensitive. It became almost like my unofficial nickname, said with a half smile, like it was a joke. But deep down, I knew they meant it. Every time I brought up something that bothered me, the reaction was the same. A dismissive wave of the hand, a forced laugh, and those same words. You're overthinking it. You take everything too personally. It started years ago, back in school, and somehow followed me into adulthood, into the workplace. I guess once people decide you're the sensitive one, they think they can brush off anything you say. At first, I tried to see it as a flaw I needed to fix. I'd force myself to laugh along when someone made a joke at my expense. I'd bite my tongue when I overheard whispers I was sure were about me. I told myself, "You're just being dramatic. Stop imagining things." But here's the thing. When something feels off, it usually is. It was little things at first. Conversations in the office would drop to a hush when I walked into the room. My name would come up in the middle of a story, and then suddenly, silence. People I used to grab lunch with stopped inviting me. "Oh, we thought you were busy," they'd say with an innocent smile. I wanted to believe them. I needed to believe them. But my gut kept screaming that I was being left out for a reason. One time, during a team meeting, someone made a comment that was clearly about me, something about being too fragile to handle feedback. Everyone laughed. My boss laughed. I smiled weakly, but my chest felt tight. I wanted to ask them what they meant, but I already knew the answer. "Oh, don't be so sensitive." So, I stayed quiet. I swallowed it all. Day after day, I convinced myself it wasn't worth the fight. But when you suppress something for long enough, it starts to eat at you. You begin to doubt not just other people, but yourself. I'd go home at night replaying moments in my head, wondering if I was imagining things, if I was somehow making it all up. Still, deep down, I knew I wasn't wrong. And then, one Friday afternoon, a day that started like any other, everything changed. One small mistake from someone else, one accidental click, and suddenly, the truth I'd been searching for landed right in my inbox. An email, not meant for me, with my name in the subject line. And in that moment, as my heart began to pound and my hands hovered over the mouse, I knew. This was going to be either the validation I'd been desperate for, or the thing that finally broke me. The subject line alone was enough to make my stomach twist. About her. Not my name, not even a nickname. Just her. Like I was an abstract concept, not a person who sat less than 10 feet away from them every single day. My finger hovered over the mouse, frozen. For a split second, I considered deleting it, pretending I'd never seen it. Because if I opened it, if I read the words inside, I wouldn't be able to go back to not knowing. But curiosity has a way of drowning out fear. And so, with a shallow breath, I clicked. The first thing I saw was the sender, Carolyn. Carolyn, who sat 2 desks over from me. Carolyn, who had invited me to her birthday party last year. Carolyn, who smiled at me every morning. The email wasn't long, maybe 3 paragraphs, but every line felt like a dagger. I honestly don't know how much longer we can keep tiptoeing around her feelings. She reads into everything and makes things awkward. Half the team is avoiding her at this point, and it's draining trying to include her in conversations. She's always on edge. It's like walking on eggshells. My eyes blurred as I kept reading. I mean, it's not like she's bad at her job, but she's exhausting. We all feel it. Even Mark said he's considering moving her to a different project just so we can breathe. Anyway, we should discuss before Monday. It was signed casually, as if she were talking about a spreadsheet or an office supply order, not a human being who could read every single word. And here's the worst part. Caroline hadn't meant to send it to me at all. I checked the recipients and realized she had meant to forward it to everyone else on my project team. Everyone. I sat there, completely still, the air in my lungs thick and heavy. My first instinct was to close the email and pretend it never happened. The same way I had brushed off every subtle comment, every inside joke I wasn't a part of, every time I'd been told I was too sensitive. But now, I had proof. Actual, undeniable proof. My cheeks burned, my hands shook, and for the first time, instead of doubting myself, I felt something new rising up inside me, something fierce, sharp, and unignorable. They had called me exhausting, they had called me too much. Fine. But they were about to learn exactly what too much looked like. I hit print. The sound of the machine spitting out the pages was deafening in the quiet office, and with those papers in hand, I realized I wasn't going to stay silent this time. The printer's hum faded, leaving me in a silence so sharp it felt like it could cut skin. I stared down at the warm sheets of paper in my hands, black ink on white, but to me, it looked like betrayal carved in stone. I slipped the pages into a folder, my fingers still trembling. Around me, the office carried on as if nothing had happened. Caroline was laughing at something on her phone. Mark was leaning back in his chair, tapping his pen against his desk. I wondered if they even remembered that I existed in that moment. The thing about hearing whispers behind your back is that you can convince yourself you're imagining it. You can make excuses for people, rationalize every suspicious glance or half smile. But once you see the words written out, there's no going back. It's no longer a suspicion, it's a fact. And that changes everything. I sat at my desk, pretending to work, but inside my mind, gears were grinding. My thoughts weren't clear yet. They were messy, raw. But there was one truth I couldn't ignore. I was done playing the quiet, agreeable one. I'd spent years walking on my own eggshells, afraid of coming across as too much, terrified of confirming their labels. But maybe too much wasn't the insult I thought it was. Maybe it was my strength. That's when I noticed it. Caroline had left her email open on her screen when she went to grab coffee. I couldn't see the full content, but I saw enough, a thread of replies, with multiple people chiming in. So it wasn't just her, it was all of them. My stomach knotted, but the knot quickly turned into something solid, like resolve. They had been building their little echo chamber for who knows how long, and now they thought they could just pass me around in their group chats, label me too sensitive, and that would be the end of it. No. If they were going to treat me like a problem, I might as well give them a problem they'd never forget. I opened my personal email and started typing. Not to HR. Not yet. This wasn't going to be a simple complaint. That would be too easy for them to spin. No, I wanted them to feel the same gut punch I felt when I read Caroline's words. Line by line, I started laying out everything I'd seen, heard, and experienced over the past year. Every exclusion, every time they'd brushed off my contributions, every time they'd made me second-guess myself. By the time I stopped typing, my heart was racing. This wasn't a draft anymore. This was a plan. And the email they'd accidentally sent me? It was going to be the spark that lit the match. The next morning, I walked into the office earlier than usual. The fluorescent lights were still warming up, casting everything in that cold, bluish haze. The quiet was comforting. It gave me a moment to steady my breathing before the circus began. I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and stared at my inbox. There it was again, that email sitting like a ticking bomb. I hadn't deleted it. I wanted it there, a reminder of the truth they could no longer deny. Caroline strolled in 5 minutes later, latte in hand, wearing that "I own this place" smirk. She didn't even look at me. Good. That made what I was about to do easier. I pulled out a printed copy of the email, folded neatly in an envelope. the same kind of envelope they'd use to pass HR forms or formal notices. My hand hovered over it for a second, and then I slipped it into the center of the conference table. No note, no explanation, just the evidence, waiting. Then I sent a meeting invite, mandatory, all team members. Nizindalkem sharp. By the time Niznat rolled around, the room buzzed with confusion. People whispered to each other, glancing at me like I'd just announced an alien landing. Mark walked in last, chuckling under his breath. "What's this about?" he asked, settling into a chair. I didn't answer. Instead, I pushed the envelope across the table toward him. His smirk faltered as he pulled out the paper and began to read. The room went silent, except for the soft rustle of pages. Caroline's face drained of color. She kept darting glances at me, as if silently begging me not to make a scene. Too late. "I think," I began, my voice calm but deliberate, "that everyone here should know exactly what's been said about me, when I wasn't in the room." A ripple went through the group. Some shifted uncomfortably. Others avoided eye contact altogether. "This isn't about a single comment," I continued. "This is about a pattern where I've been undermined, excluded, and labeled. And I'm done pretending it's not happening." Mark cleared his throat, clearly flustered. "Look, maybe you're misinterpreting—" "Read the email again," I cut in sharply. He did. And this time, his jaw tightened, because there was no misinterpreting that. Caroline tried to jump in, muttering something about just venting and harmless jokes, but I didn't let her. "You accidentally sent this to me," I said, locking eyes with her. "And that was the best mistake you could have made, because now I have proof." The tension was so thick, you could almost hear it humming. I could see the wheels turning in everyone's heads, not out of guilt for what they'd done, but out of fear for what I might do next. And that fear, that was exactly what I wanted. Because this was just step one. That meeting was only the beginning. They thought it would end with an awkward silence and a few mumbled apologies, that I'd let it go after getting my moment of attention. But they didn't know me. The second I stepped out of that conference room, I had a plan. And this time, I wasn't just going to defend myself. I was going to expose every single thing they'd been doing behind my back. First, I forwarded the email to my personal account. Then, I started digging. Old Slack messages, meeting transcripts, performance reviews with suspicious missing sections. The more I looked, the more patterns I found. Little breadcrumbs of their constant sabotage. By noon, I had a folder thick enough to sink them all. At lunch, I didn't sit at my usual table. I took my tray and went straight outside, where two of our remote contractors happened to be visiting for the week. They had their own stories. How Caroline had forgotten to pass along my instructions. How Mark had reassigned my work without telling me, making it look like I missed deadlines. It was bigger than I thought. That night, at home, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and made 3 versions of my evidence file. One for HR, clean, chronological, undeniable. One for the executive board, highlighting the financial cost of their sabotage. And one for me, the unedited, raw version, in case I ever needed to go public. And yes, I considered going public. By the next morning, I was ready. I booked a private meeting with HR, placed the envelope of printed emails in front of them, and sat back as they read. I didn't have to say much. The look on their faces told me they were already thinking about lawsuits, PR damage, and how to make this go away quietly. Caroline and Mark had no idea this was happening. They were in the break room, laughing over coffee, probably assuming I was still licking my wounds. Oh, they were going to be in for a surprise. Because the next time we all sat in the same room, the power dynamic would be completely different. And for the first time in months, I felt it. That delicious, sharp-edged confidence that comes when you know the truth is on your side. and you're about to use it. It happened faster than I expected. Barely 2 hours after I handed over my file, HR sent out 3 calendar invites. Me, Caroline, Mark. Same time, same room. The subject line? Discussion regarding workplace conduct. If they had even the slightest idea what was coming, they didn't show it. When I walked past their desks on the way to the meeting, Caroline smirked at me, that same smug, patronizing smile she'd been wearing for months. Mark didn't even look up from his screen. Fine. Let them enjoy their last few minutes of ignorance. The conference room was colder than usual, the blinds half closed, giving the whole place a shadowy, tense feel. HR was already there, Sarah, the HR director, and James, the compliance officer. 2 printed folders sat in front of them. I knew exactly what was inside. We all sat down. Sarah cleared her throat, her voice calm, but with a certain weight to it. Thank you for coming. We have received some information that we need to discuss immediately. Caroline leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. Let me guess. Someone's upset again? She said, glancing at me like this was going to be another petty complaint. James didn't even look at her. Instead, he slid the first folder across the table. Before you respond, I suggest you read this in full. Mark reached for it, still looking bored. But as his eyes scanned the first page, his expression shifted. Slowly. First confusion, then realization, and finally, panic. Caroline grabbed the folder from him. Her smirk faltered after the first paragraph. By the third page, her jaw tightened. Every word, every screenshot, every timestamp, right there in black and white. Their jokes, their harmless comments, the deliberate missing emails, the instructions they'd altered to make me look incompetent. Sarah's voice broke the silence. This is a serious violation of our company's code of conduct and potentially labor law. Before we proceed further, I'm giving you the opportunity to explain yourselves. Neither of them spoke. The only sound was the ticking clock on the wall. I sat there, hands folded in my lap, my heart pounding, not from fear, but from the sheer electric satisfaction of watching them squirm. For months, they'd made me feel small, overreactive, too sensitive. Now, they were the ones on trial, and I wasn't done yet. Caroline was the first to break the silence. This is being taken completely out of context, she said, her voice shaky but still trying to sound authoritative. She turned to Sarah, eyebrows raised like she was expecting immediate sympathy. We joke around in the office all the time. Everyone does. This is just office banter. James didn't even blink. Office banter doesn't involve deliberately altering documents, falsifying deadlines, or instructing colleagues to ignore a team member's emails, especially when that team member has reported feeling targeted. Mark finally spoke, his voice low. Look, I didn't mean for any of this to blow up. We were under a lot of pressure, and sometimes things get said that... That what? I cut in, my tone calm but sharp. That somehow justify you making me the office punching bag? That justify you deliberately sabotaging my work, just so you could laugh about it after hours? The room went quiet again. I could feel the heat radiating from them, a mixture of embarrassment and anger. But there was something else too. Fear. Caroline leaned forward, desperate now. You can't seriously think this is grounds for... Sarah interrupted, her voice firm. This isn't about what we think. This is about documented violations of company policy. And I assure you, this is serious. James added, and just so you're both aware, the fact that these actions were coordinated between the two of you makes this even more severe. Mark's eyes flicked toward Caroline, and in that moment, I saw it. The beginning of the fracture. The alliance that had fueled months of whispered comments and cruel pranks was starting to crumble. Don't look at me like that, Caroline snapped at him, Half of those emails were your idea. Mark straightened, his jaw tightening. And you were the one who kept pushing it. You told me she'd quit if we made her miserable enough. Sarah held up her hand, cutting off the brewing argument. That's enough. We're going to take a short break. When we reconvene, you'll each have the opportunity to make a statement, separately. They both froze at that word, separately, because they knew what it meant. It meant the company wanted to hear their stories apart from each other. It meant loyalty would dissolve fast. As Sarah and James stepped out of the room, I stayed seated, letting the silence between Caroline and Mark grow heavier, until it was almost unbearable. And then, just before I followed HR out, I looked at them and said quietly, "You two thought I was too sensitive. Turns out I was just paying attention." When we came back into the conference room, the atmosphere had changed. Caroline was sitting stiffly, arms crossed, avoiding Mark's gaze. Mark, on the other hand, was leaning back in his chair, a small smirk tugging at his lips, the kind of smirk you see on someone who's about to throw someone else under the bus. Sarah placed 2 fresh folders on the table. We'll start with Caroline. Caroline's voice was steady at first, but I could hear the tremor underneath. Look, I never intended to hurt anyone. This whole thing. It was a misunderstanding that escalated. Mark was the one who took things too far. He was the one sending those late-night messages, telling me to make sure she knows she's not welcome. Mark's smirk vanished instantly. Wow! Seriously? You're going to act like you didn't initiate half of this? Those spreadsheet mistakes? That was all you, Caroline. And don't forget, you were the one who told me she was too weak to survive in this team. Sarah held up a hand, but they were already unraveling. Oh, please, Caroline shot back. You loved making her life hell. Don't act like you were some innocent bystander. You even said HR wouldn't care because she's too emotional to be taken seriously. Mark's face darkened, and he leaned forward. And you said, and I quote, "If she quits, I'll get her client accounts." Don't even try to deny it. You wanted her gone for your own gain. At this point, Sarah didn't bother stopping them. She just glanced at James, who was jotting down every word. They were digging their own graves. I sat back, watching them burn through whatever shred of alliance they'd had left. Every accusation they threw at each other was another confirmation of what I'd known all along, that it was never just banter. It was calculated, coordinated, and now they were exposing each other with every sentence. Caroline turned to Sarah, almost pleading. You have to believe me. I was following his lead. I didn't want to, but I thought... Oh, save it, Mark interrupted. You weren't following anyone's lead. You're just mad you got caught. Sarah finally spoke. All right, that's enough. We've heard more than we needed to. We'll take everything you've both said into consideration. As they were escorted out of the room, separately this time, Caroline shot me a glare so sharp it could cut glass. Mark didn't look at me at all, but I saw the way his hands trembled as he gathered his things. They came into that meeting as a united front. They were leaving as enemies, and I was finally in control of the story. 2 days later, my phone buzzed with an email notification from HR. Subject: Outcome of investigation. My heart pounded as I clicked it open. It wasn't long or complicated, just a few short paragraphs that would change everything. Caroline and Mark were both found in violation of multiple workplace conduct policies. Effective immediately, they were suspended without pay pending final termination review. Their access to company systems had already been revoked. I stared at the words, rereading them over and over. It wasn't just that they were being removed, it was the speed. No long delays. No, we'll think about it. They were done. A follow-up call from Sarah confirmed the rest. We took their statements into account, along with the evidence you provided, and The evidence they provided against each other, she said, a hint of satisfaction in her voice. Honestly, they made our job much easier. I almost laughed. They had built their little empire of whispers and sabotage, only to tear it down themselves. But here's where it got interesting. Sarah continued. Also, we've reassigned the client accounts they were managing. Since you're familiar with most of those clients already, and given your track record, we'd like to offer them to you. I blinked. Wait, all of them? Yes. You'd be our primary point of contact for 3 of our top accounts. This also comes with a salary adjustment, of course. I felt my throat tighten. This wasn't just about winning. This was about thriving. When I hung up, I sat there in my apartment, staring at the city lights outside my window. It was surreal. Just weeks ago, I was questioning whether I should even stay in this job. Now, the people who'd tried to push me out were gone, and I was stepping into a role more powerful than I'd ever imagined. And yet, there was still one thing left to do. Something I'd been waiting for since the day Caroline smirked at me across the break room and said, "You'll never last here." Tomorrow I was going to see her, not to gloat, not to yell, but to leave her with one final message she'd never forget. The next morning, I arrived at the office earlier than usual. The building was quieter than normal. The absence of Caroline and Mark was already noticeable. Some co-workers whispered, some smiled at me knowingly, and I could feel the shift in energy. I walked to Caroline's old desk. It looked empty. I could almost hear her smirk in my mind, imagining she'd be laughing at how I couldn't handle this place. I opened my bag and took out a small envelope I'd prepared the night before. Inside was a neatly printed note, simple and direct. You underestimated me. You tried to push me out. And yet, here I am, stronger, recognized, and thriving. Let this be your lesson. The energy you put into tearing others down can become the very thing that destroys you. I placed the envelope on her desk. No fanfare, no yelling, no confrontation, just a quiet, undeniable statement. As I turned to leave, a few colleagues peeked from around corners, giving subtle nods of support. I didn't need their praise. The satisfaction of seeing justice done, the fairness restored, was enough. Later that day, HR informed me that Caroline had resigned rather than face termination. Mark was officially let go. The toxic duo was finally out of my life. I settled into my new role, managing the top client accounts. Every challenge felt invigorating. Every success earned. I realized something profound. It wasn't just about defeating them. It was about proving to myself that I deserved respect, recognition, and peace, and that I wouldn't allow anyone to steal my confidence or my career again. That night, I sat by my window, reflecting on the past few weeks. The anxiety, the stress, the betrayal. It had all led to this moment of empowerment. I smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile, and for the first time in a long while, I felt completely free. Because sometimes, the people who laugh at you, underestimate you, or try to break you, end up being the ones who fuel your greatest triumph.